July 5th, 1969, Nairobi's government road what we now know today as Moi Avenue. The city moved as it always did, unaware that history was seconds away from being rewritten. Then, a single bullet tore through the air. Not just a bullet, but the one that changed Kenya forever. In that moment, the future of a nation was ripped apart. Tom Mboya, young, brilliant and full of promise, collapsed onto the pavement. A leader of the people, a many believed destined for presidency, gone in an instant. But this was no ordinary killing. This was an execution in broad daylight, and with it came conspiracies, secrets, and questions that still haunt Kenya more than half a century later. This is the story of Tom Mboya, the man, the mystery, and the bullet that changed history. In every shadow, a secret waits to be uncovered. In every silence, there are stories never meant to be told. This is where the whispers of the past meet the truths buried deep. Welcome to 254 Crime Tips by Mr. J, a place where we dig into crimes others fear to touch, exposing the dark side of history and the untold faces of Kenya's hidden truths. Brace yourself, the journey into the unknown starts now. In the quiet village of Kilimambogo near Thika, a child was born in 1930 who will one day stand at the very center of Kenya's destiny. His name, Thomas Joseph Odhiambo Mboya. Unlike many of his peers, young Tom grew far from the lakeside home of his Luo heritage in Rusinga Island. Instead, his father, a low-wage sisal cutter, worked in plantations in central Kenya. Poverty shadowed his childhood, but inside that shadow grew something rare. Ambition, sharper than the machetes that cut the sisal fields.
We have always stated that our independence cannot be complete if in fact there is any part of the world where the black man is not accorded his rightful position in society.
Tom's education began in mission schools, places that demanded strict discipline but also opened new worlds. Teachers described him as brilliant, confident, and unshaken in spirit. Even then, Mboya carried himself differently. Calm but commanding, humble but impossible to ignore. By the late 1940s, Mboya was in Nairobi, training as a sanitary inspector at the Royal Sanitary Institute. It may sound like an ordinary civil job, but to Tom, it was more than work. It was a vantage point to see how colonial systems functioned and how they crushed African ambition. And in the evenings when other workers went home, Mboya sharpened his true weapon, his voice. He studied public speaking, read political theories, and absorbed the winds of independence sweeping across Africa and beyond. By his mid-20s, he had joined the trade union movement. This was no small step. Trade unions were not only about wages, they were political battlegrounds. Here Tom found his stage. With a sharp tongue and unshakable confidence, he spoke to crowds of workers who saw something in him, something rare, a leader unafraid of the colonial government, yet disciplined enough to negotiate with them. Unlike other fiery activists who sometimes stumbled into jail, Tom was strategic. He knew when to shout, when to whisper, and when to shake hands. His balance of intellect and charisma caught international eyes, especially in Britain and the United States. By the 1950s, he wasn't just a union leader. He was becoming a global figure in the fight for African independence. If you're enjoying this story so far, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. There's so much to uncover in the chapters ahead. Tom Mboya's rise was not just about intelligence. It was about timing, charisma, and vision. In the 1950s, Kenya was still under the iron grip of colonial rule. The Mau rebellion had shaken the British, but it was leaders like Mboya who presented a different kind of threat, one armed not with guns, but with education and diplomacy. Mboya understood something few others did. The future of Kenya will be shaped not just on the battlefield, but in classrooms and boardrooms. This is why he launched one of the most remarkable programs in African history, the airlift. With support from Kennedy family and other allies, Mboya helped send hundreds of Kenyans to study in America. Among them was Barack Obama Sr., whose son will one day become the President of the United States. Another was Wangari Maathai, who will go on to win the Nobel Peace Prize for a fight for democracy, human rights, and the environment. Mboya wasn't just changing lives, he was planting seeds that would transform the entire world.
So you believe in Africa for Africans?
Well, I believe in Africa for the Africans in the context that there is a place called Africa, and that the people who live in that place must want to call themselves Africans. And by that, of course, I'm referring particularly to the non-Africans, the immigrant communities who have decided to make parts of Africa their homes, in South Africa, in French Africa, and in Eastern Central Africa. We believe that if they want to live in Africa, they must identify themselves with the Africans. They cannot live in Africa and still claim to be Europeans, Americans, or any other nationalities.
But while his star rose internationally, at home the game of politics was turning deadly. Kenya's path to independence was filled with rivalries, and Mboya's brilliance made him a target of envy. He was eloquent, he was popular, and perhaps most dangerously, he was young. At just 30, he was already at the center of Kenya's future, working closely with Jomo Kenyatta, positioning himself as a natural successor. And this is where the shadows begin to gather. Whispers grew louder. Was Mboya moving too fast? Was his influence too strong? In the backrooms of power, some begin to see him less as an ally and more as a threat. But still, Mboya pressed on. He gave speeches that electrified crowds, calling for unity, freedom, and a new Kenya that will take its rightful place on the global stage.
I think perhaps what may have led to this misunderstanding is when I said that Kenya was in such urgent need for unity and working together and stability that from our point of view and from the point of view of those Europeans who have decided to become Kenya citizens and to remain in Kenya, it is much better that those Europeans who have no interest in the future of Kenya and those who do not wish at all to work with us in Kenya in building the new nation should leave to leave us all alone to work out our problems with those Europeans who have decided to stay and forge our new relationships. I think perhaps this is what some people have misunderstood.
To many, he was more than a politician. He was the symbol of possibility. Yet as history has shown us time and again, those who shine brightest often attract the darkest enemies. By the late 1960s, the divisions within Kenya's leadership were no longer hidden. While Kenyatta held the presidency, succession was the question everybody whispered about, but no one dared to speak aloud. And in every conversation, one name kept coming up: Tom Mboya. By the late 1960s, Kenya was caught in a storm of power and ambition. As alliances shifted and rivalries deepened, one figure stood out: Tom Mboya. Brilliant, charismatic, and deeply strategic. He wasn't just a politician, he was the architect of Kenya's path forward. Fun fact, Mboya is often credited with designing the Kenyan national flag, a lasting symbol of unity and independence.
What?
Yes, a lot of Kenyans are not aware, but it was actually Tom Mboya who drew the Kenyan national flag. But even as he rose, he never lost his human side. In 1962, he married Pamela Odede in a wedding that became one of the most glamorous and talked about events of the era. A union that showed a softer, more personal side of the man who carried so many of the nation's hope. Yet behind the celebrations, shadows were forming. The closer Mboya got to power, the more dangerous his world became. Friends became rivals, allies turned suspicious, and his rising popularity threatened those who were already clinging to the top. By 1969, the whispers of conspiracy were no longer whispers. They were open questions. Was Mboya being groomed to take over as Kenya's future president? And if so, who will risk everything to stop him? The nation's future was hanging in the balance, and Tom Mboya stood at the very center of it all.
Let us hope that change there will be. But this change cannot be in terms of pious resolutions and words. It's got to be translated into action. For it is only then that we shall know that there is a definite departure from the past, and that America intends to take on a new role.
By mid-1969, tensions had reached a breaking point. Public rallies turned into battleground of ideas, with Mboya's visions of a modern, united Kenya clashing against older, entrenched power structures. He was adored by the youth, respected abroad, and feared by those who saw him as a threat. Every speech he gave drew massive crowds, each one chanting his name with hope that he represented a brighter tomorrow. But in the shadows, resentment brewed. Rivals accused him of being too close to the West, too ambitious, too popular. The higher he climbed, the more dangerous it became. And then, July 5th, 1969, the day when Kenya's promise and peril collided, on Nairobi's government road, what we now call Moi Avenue, a bullet was fired. A shot that didn't just take the life of Tom Mboya, it changed the course of Kenya's history forever. Tom Mboya had just stepped out of Chinese pharmacy on Government Road, what we now call Moi Avenue. It was an ordinary Saturday afternoon. The city bustled, matatus honking, traders calling out. Nairobi's alive as always. But at that moment, history was waiting. A man stepped forward. He raised his gun and in broad daylight in front of stand onlookers, pulled the trigger. The shot cracked through the air, a single bullet that shattered Kenya's future. Mboya collapsed on the pavement, clutching his chest. Blood stained his shirt as horrified bystanders rushed to help. He was quickly lifted into a car and sped into Nairobi Hospital. Doctors worked frantically. Nurses ran up and down the halls. Outside, a crowd gathered, praying, crying, waiting. But despite every effort, the wound was too grave. Within the hour, Tom Mboya was pronounced dead. Aww. When the news reached the waiting crowd, screams echoed through the hospital grounds. Strangers embraced, others fell to the floor in disbelief. Kenya was paralyzed. At just 38 years old, a rising star, perhaps the brightest of his generation, was gone. And as grief spread across the nation, one question lingered like a shadow. Who pulled the strings behind his death? At his funeral, tens of thousands gathered. Leaders, diplomats, and ordinary citizens stood shoulder to shoulder, mourning not just a man, but the promise of a brighter Kenya. But grief quickly turned to demand for justice. Whispers of conspiracies began to spread through every corner of the nation.
Might have had something to do with the assassination of Mr. Mboya. You commented on this, I know.
I commented last night, and I would like to repeat the same thing, that we have no knowledge of this, and I cannot definitely say.
Police launched a massive manhunt, and within days they arrested a man, Nahashon Isaac Njega Njoroge. He was caught with the murder weapon still in his possession. When asked why he killed Mboya, his chilling response shocked the nation. "Why don't you go and ask the big man?" Words that hinted at something darker, something bigger than one gunman. Tom Mboya's life was cut short, but his dream of a united, progressive Kenya has never died. Today, if you walk through the bustling streets of Nairobi CBD, you will find his bronze statue standing tall on Moi Avenue, the very road where his story ended. It's more than just a monument, it's a reminder of the price paid for freedom, a reminder of the brilliance and courage of a young leader who refused to be silenced. Mboya may have been buried decades ago, but his spirit still walks among us, in the opportunities he created, in the leaders he inspired, in the future generations who continue to chase the Kenya he once envisioned. This is the legacy of Tom Mboya. Thank you for watching this documentary. If you found this story powerful, don't forget to subscribe to 254 Crime Tape for more untold stories that shaped our history. And now, I want to hear from you. Which story should we uncover next? Drop your suggestion in the comments below, because your voice shapes this channel's journey. Until next time, this has been 254 Crime Tapes by Mr. J. Stay curious, stay questioning, and remember, history is never really past. It still lives with us today.